So, good morning. My name is André Verissimo. I'm a business journalist, a senior reporter for Echo, a Portuguese business newspaper. And I'd like to start by congratulating Sports Integrity Global Alliance for this event and its dedication to integrity and sustainability in sports. We all agree it's a huge, important issue. And it's a pleasure to be the moderator of this panel. We'll go right to our talk. And I would start with Daniela. And by asking you, the 2030 agenda, adopted in 2015 by the United Nations, recalls that sport is an important enabler of sustainable development. How does it contribute to social development, inclusion, and reducing inequalities? How is sport contributing to achieving the SDGs?
Thank you for the opportunity to share a teeny bit more of what I already mentioned yesterday. I have one question myself. How many of you were here yesterday? Okay, so there are some new people, and therefore I will have to repeat a few things I said yesterday for the newcomers, if you don't mind. So in order to answer your question, if we think of the 2030 agenda, and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, with the various crises that we're facing now in the world, most probably we will not be able to achieve all these 17 goals by the year 2030. So we have to think in terms of the future. And as Emmanuel said, COVID gave us the opportunity to rethink the way the world is operating. And there is the sentence to build back better, but I agree that we have actually to build forward better. So I very much applaud you, Emmanuel, for having mentioned that in your speech. Now, when it comes to social development, okay, we can think of the various sustainable development goals. The first one is eradication of poverty, the second one is nutrition and food, the third is health, the fourth is education, the fifth is gender, the sixth is oceans, and I could go on. Number 8 is employment. Number 10, for instance, is reducing the gap of inequalities. 16, that was mentioned by the ASG Francesca, is about social justice and communities, and so on until number 17. And this is actually what's happening here, is the SDG 17, to create partnerships and promote international cooperation. Now, all of this helps to promote in different ways, depending on our kind of expertise, inclusion, how sport can facilitate various groups of the population, vulnerable people, older people, youth, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and the family, where all the various generations meet, to promote concepts of self-esteem. Sport can help there, leadership, but also how to, when you play sports, often they are played in a team, as a team. So how to learn to improve our soft skills as leaders, but also in terms of negotiating within the family. So that helps us to promote concepts of peace, how to become tolerant. And then when it comes to social development and the various SDGs, we should also think about the new contemporary world. And there are many countries that are still in this agricultural revolution, and others are already in the 5th revolution, that is STEAM. That a world where sport can promote new ways of doing studying, of lifelong learning, promoting employment through science, S, T, technology, A, art and design, E, engineering, and M, math. And you find all of this in sport as well. If you teach children through sport to kick a ball, for instance, and then you have, in order to do to make a goal happen, you have to feel how strong the wind is. So you have to kick a certain strength to the ball, and then there is a trajectory, and you go on and on. You are teaching actually STEAM in a funny way, and then you translate all of that in math, in physics. So another way is to therefore think about innovative ways to make our virtual world as well, be that we play sport in urban areas or rural areas, for instance, accessible and inclusive. During COVID, those who had access to technology and internet, not many in the world, there is still a huge gap there in terms of not many countries having the broadband and therefore not having access to internet, but maybe radio and maybe television. And so people could keep active thanks to physical activities. When we talk about sport and sustainability and peace, we have to think of sport not mainly about the sport industry or federations, etc. We have to think about people. Whatever allows us to make any kind of movement, it's physical activity, it's sport. In fact, in the definition of the Kazan Action Plan of UNESCO, sport is defined as any kind of physical activity that we can perform, including dance. And if we think of the indigenous games, for instance, in the indigenous Olympics, that's also sport. We often talk about football, which is amazing. I'm Italian, so soccer, yay, untouchable. But there are many other ways through which the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals, if we think of SDG 6, oceans, it's water, it's sailing, it's fishing. There is lots of stuff there related to sports and what we can do in order to prevent the planet to be exploited as well through sport.
So sports can have an impact across the board.
Absolutely.
On the SDGs.
It's cross-cutting.
Matt, so going to football, how does a club like Liverpool FC works these sustainability issues? How is trying to make an impact?
Well, firstly, I should have recorded what Daniela just said, because there was a brilliant answer there, and I think it encapsulated a lot of how we try and certainly ingrain the UN Sustainable Development Goals into what we do, primarily to help to demonstrate, one of the final words that Daniela used, impact, to try and demonstrate the impact of what we do. I think first and foremost, both the Assistant Secretary General and Daniela have used different words but saying the same thing. The Assistant Secretary General said fun, and Daniela said enjoyment. I think ultimately, I'm passionate about the fact that young people learn. We all learn, but young people certainly learn if they're enjoying it and having fun. I've got a 7-year-old at home. If I try and sit down and do maths homework with him, he's not with me. If I relate it to football, he listens. So we have a unique opportunity and a unique vehicle to get to young people and to get to communities that few other mediums can. From the perspective of Liverpool Football Club and Liverpool Football Club Foundation, we see sustainability in the widest sense. I think this is how we're talking about it here for the week anyway. So I think there's a danger people hear the word sustainability and they think the environment. Yes, that's a huge part of it, but that's part of it. And we at Liverpool, we call it the red way. It has to be red because of Liverpool, but we call it the red way. And that encapsulates our communities, our people and our planet. And so it's about the whole society and how we can work together to build a better future, ultimately. I think the big part for us is that, and I was thinking it as well as Daniela, I was rewriting my speech as Daniela was talking there, but I think there's something quite significant about us all accepting that we can't all do it. None of us can do it on our own. No organisation can do this on their own. So the example I would give is that we primarily link to the UN Sustainable Development Goals to demonstrate our impact in the Liverpool City region. So I don't know how many people we have in the audience from England or the UK. First of all, you'll recognise that my accent is London, not Liverpool, so different parts of the country. But but I've been fortunate enough to do this job, heading up the charity at different clubs. But Liverpool, if you've been to watch football there, is one of the great capitals of world football. And it's an unbelievable experience. But the stadium is housed in one of the most deprived communities of the UK. So first and foremost, our work is there. But we also recognise we're a global club. So how do we impact globally? So we looked at the 17 UN SDGs, and we recognise that whilst we might have some impact on most, primarily where do we have our biggest impact? And we picked 7 of those. So that's where we focus our work. And then we use a model, sorry if this is the longest answer in the world, apologies. We use a model called the UEFA GROW model, which enables us to track the financial benefits of the Liverpool City region. And I think that's important because it enables us to demonstrate, we could talk about numbers, we can talk about the change we've made on young people's lives, but it's also allow us to talk financially about the impact it has. Because bluntly, it opens doors and it gives us credibility. And I think for a long time, perhaps, and I've worked in the sports industry for 25 odd years, I started when I was about 12, obviously. We've perhaps lacked credibility. People have seen it as fun and enjoyment, but not have an impact. It is both. It is definitely both, and it can make a change because of that.
Okay. Anna, I'll jump to you so we can get to know another good example of applying sustainability to sports. So Formula E started in 2014, 8 years ago. Now almost everyone wants an electric car. Besides creating awareness for electric mobility, how is Formula E addressing the sustainability challenges? What else is it doing?
Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, we're working now. So thanks very much for having me here today. I think it's, what's so interesting here is, starting from the top around, the UN sustainability goals that they set. And when we think about our own sustainability agenda as a championship, then those are goals that, we have very close to our heart. We're actually very proud to have a partnership with UNICEF as a founding sports partner and the Safe and Healthy Environment Fund. So we're into year 2 of a 3-year deal with UNICEF there. And really, just taking a step back for a moment, for those of you that don't know that much about Formula E, the world didn't need another motor racing championship. There are, old and highly engaged sports, the likes of, football, other forms of motorsport, golf, tennis, whatever it is that excites you, that started from the simplicity of fandom, that, people went out and played football, or they played tennis, or they played golf, and they enjoyed playing with each other, and then over time they also really enjoyed watching other people play. And then the whole commercial structure that, that we all know and understand probably a bit better now, has developed and really accelerated its development, especially over the last kind of 20, 25 years, across the board. When Formula E was, incepted in 2014, the idea kicked off in 2012 with the idea about what an all-electric racing championship could look like, and then who could promote that and bring it to reality. And when you think about what the acceleration around regulation, both at a international, regional, national, local level, and right down to the commitments that cities are making, I mean, the last 2 or 3 years have really been seismic in terms of the commitment around clean air quality, and the importance of electric as we look at the evolution of transportation. And that actually wasn't the case in 2012, 13, 14, and so everyone thought they were slightly bonkers in even trying to get this thing off the ground. And so what Formula E did was bring together an amazing array of commercial partners, cities around the world that were pretty forward-thinking on this stuff, and created an environment to put sport on and use the power of sport to inspire and excite people about its role to, normalize electric transportation. And then, I think if we look now, the fact that it's getting pretty well documented that the best supercars in the world are going to have or will have electric engines. And we've seen the rise of highly valuable all-electric manufacturers that are really raising the valuation bar and either forcing or accelerating the traditional manufacturers to to go on a journey? And are there lots of complications around that, around workforce, around supply chain, and how cars are built, etc. There are lots of challenges, both practically and also from a politically sensitive perspective. But I think it's incredibly encouraging. And from us as a championship, our biggest and our most impactful thing we can do is to inspire and excite as many people as possible and produce really phenomenal content that people support, that great partners come on board with, that cities activate, that we can do that on a global stage and then really bring it to life locally. But specifically around the sustainable development goals, as a championship, we believe that we have to lead by example. So, we are proud that we are a net zero carbon championship. We'd just finished our 8th season of racing. So at the end of season 6, we announced that we, because we'd, done a pretty accurate job around measuring and reducing and monitoring our carbon impact across the championship, including the racing teams, we were in a position to understand and able to offset our remaining carbon impact and do that from the beginning of the life of the championship. As we move forward, we're making commitments to science-based targets, which are going to be hugely challenging as you grow a championship, and logistics is the biggest part of your carbon impact. Then work on how we ship our show around the world and do that, as responsibly as we can is a huge challenge. But we believe that the overall power of going around the world, of spreading that message of advocacy, of education, of training and development is a critical part in terms of having an influence far greater than our own sphere. And so I'll leave it on the, using a specific example of our partnership with UNICEF. I think in the last year, the Safe and Healthy Environment Fund, which, as I say, we are proud to be one partner of, I think over 700,000 children in 75 countries around the world are standing up, are advocating, are using the STEM education that they're being encouraged to stick with to be impactful and to be vocal about the future and the importance of the environment to their futures and to us all. So, I'd say we've only just got started. Liverpool Football Club, great example of a huge, powerful brand, a rich history of spanning circa 150 years. We are an eye blink in sporting terms, and we've got a lot ahead of us, but we'd like to think we're laying some solid foundations.
So we have here one more example of partnering with other institutions. Murray, BSI is an important player in helping to certificate the process that can assure that sustainability is being addressed. So how is BSI promoting sustainability, and what is the role of certification in this process?
Yeah, thanks, Andre. Really interesting what everybody's saying, and this is to put BSI in the context of the sporting world, really, because we're a national standards body. We're the first national standards body, based in the UK, obviously. Been around for a very long time. We convene to establish standards that guide behaviours in industry, across society, and so on. BSI works under a royal charter, and in essence, that means we must benefit society in whatever we do. So a profit-for-purpose organisation that is looking for opportunities to put back into society and to really stabilise and to level the balance sheet in terms of impact on the environment, on society, on people, and so on. I think in terms of promoting sustainability in sport, there's one very, very relevant international standard, ISO 20121. I'll call it 2012-1. That's based on an original British standard developed by BSI called 8901. I won't blind you with numbers, but just bear 2012-1 in mind. And we provide certification for organisations that are serious about introducing, implementing sustainability around their sporting events. The nature of those events are different. We've got Liverpool Football Club fixed venue. I was trying to make the link with the accent, actually, Matt. I struggled with that. And then for Formula E, obviously, you know, a venue, an event that moves around different venues year on year and so on. I'll talk about those a little bit later if there's an opportunity to. But back to your question about how we promote, and a lot of the promotion that BSI does is through the work that we do with our clients. So we help them, we support them to address their sustainability risks and realize their opportunities, obviously. We use standards, we use frameworks to do that. We act in an independent capacity through assessment, through evaluation, through challenge, and that's an important word in all of this. We challenge organizations. So should a sporting organization go for 2012, want the certification, we'll make sure we challenge that they're doing the right thing, they're doing it properly, they're doing it effectively, they're implementing for the long term, and they're really making an impact. They're addressing the risks, they're engaging with their stakeholders, and they're getting results. And that's what it's about for us. Or it doesn't get the recognition that a certification can bring. And I'll just make a point about the SDGs. A lot of the work that we do links very strongly to SDG 17, so that's partnership building, essentially. And of course, you know, we've got our own internal sustainability strategy, and we speak to a number of the other SDGs, but we help our clients effectively make that link with SDG 17. Something a number of our clients struggle with, but we're part of that missing link for them in that respect too.
Thank you. Daniela, it would be interesting to hear from you some examples of how UN is using sports to meet its goals, its sustainable development goals.
Thank you. I will expand it in a bit. The UN is the UN, it's a policy body, but there is the UN family. So there are the specialized agencies like UNICEF, FAO, WHO, UNESCO. The list is long. and they're all part of the UN family. So the United Nations, having the substantive mandate on sport for development and peace, works with all these different agencies. So I will, for instance, not say much about UNICEF because we already had a quite thorough, detailed explanation of what UNICEF is doing. But for instance, we have the World Health Organization that has done a lot, particularly during COVID and now while we try to recover, to promote health and sport in different ways. We have UNHCR that deals with refugees and the crisis that we're facing now in Europe. So they also, through sport, are allowing, for instance, those who are suffering from traumas or are living in refugees camps through sport to regain the ability to trust in a better world and to keep remembering how to be able afterwards to reintegrate in the society, which is not the refugees camp. But other initiatives are, for instance, UNESCO has launched a Fit for, allow me to see because I don't remember, Fit for Life, yes. And so it's a sport, health, and equality through education. It's a very interesting global plan they're having, and they're working very closely, for instance, with UN Women when it comes to gender equality. Then if I think of the United Nations, not a specialized agency, but the UN, the division I lead, the Division for Inclusive Social Development that Francesca Spatolizano, the ASG of the United Nations Department of Global of Economic and Social Affairs. So the division is part of that department. We do quite a bit of capacity development, actually. So we have recently, we are in the way of finalizing a toolkit on sport, where there is also a module about sport and integrity. We go to developing countries if asked so, and together with also so-called developed countries that often are donors, we go to these beneficiaries. We work together with the federations, associations, NGOs, etc., to bring at the grassroots level the information and knowledge. Information, as you know, you're a journalist, is power. So we, by sharing what has been decided at international level, treaties, conventions, and so on, by sharing that information at local level, we are empowering people in companies, industries, NGOs, and governments, because not necessarily what has been decided at international level then falls down as a cascade at national level at the various ministries or local communities of mayors. So this is another way for us to disseminate and share our knowledge to make sure that then sport for development and peace is known and implemented, so to have an impact. As my colleague next to me said, we can't work alone. So each of us united, we are a part of a puzzle, okay? And SIGA is working towards one of these key pieces of this puzzle, that is integrity and trust. We really needed to rebuild the trust. And this is another activity we are doing, for instance, through the Department of Global Communication of the United Nations, by raising awareness about the SDGs, the sport, and the various activities that the private sector, but also each individual can play through sport and physical activities. How we can therefore promote a better world. Is this utopia? No. You see, there is a difference between illusions. You can't make them become reality. And dreams. Dreams can become a reality. And I think that part of we are all dreaming in this beautiful vision, so each of us can make this dream become a reality. And we really count on you. Please do come to the UN, use the space the UN is giving, and then it's up to member states at the very end, because that's their house, to decide what they can do. However, the private sector, NGOs, foundations, etc., they have constant interaction at national level with the policymakers for different reasons. So you can also influence, in a positive way, change where new policies are needed and new policies need to be developed, or policies already exist, but they needed to be better implemented. There, you can play a role as well. United, we can really achieve all the 17 goals.
Very well. Matt, I imagine many sports organizations, their managers may be watching us today, would like to understand how do I do it? How can I make an impact? What actions do I have to make? So how does Liverpool FC work with local communities? It has partners to help them on this mission. How is this work done?
Good question. Yeah, so primarily, it was alluded to earlier about Formula E being a young sport, football obviously not being a young sport, and the brand of the club is big. We have supporters. Supposedly it's 1 billion. I don't know how they work that out, but around the world. But so the potential there is huge. In some respects, the brand is bigger than the entity. You know, as a foundation, we're a smallish organisation. We have 80 staff, primarily based in the Liverpool City region. But it follows that theme about partnership. So even in that space, we don't try and be the experts in everything. So we do two things basically. We deliver programs ourselves, so boots on the ground, sports coaches, youth workers, teachers, delivering programs. And we also support and fund others to develop their work and deliver where they're experts. So a key part of that is that, I can't point at the crest because I'm not wearing it, but that Liverpool badge is very powerful. If we go into an area or a space, there's a danger that we can diminish or downgrade some of the good work that's already happening there on a local level. So what we try and do instead of is to work with existing partners. So one quick example is we've got 6 community hubs across the Liverpool City region. So the Liverpool City region is made up of 6 boroughs. So and in the most disadvantaged parts, so in the top 10% areas of deprivation, I won't get too boring with the science, but we have people in the team that are very good at that. I just listen to what they say. But in those targeted areas, we work with an existing community centre or sports centre. We help fund them. We deliver our work from there, but crucially, we also support them to access other funding. So they grow, they develop. Those organisations employ people, so there's sustainability there, good jobs, good education from those programs, physically active young people in those areas, rather than us going in and taking over. So if that makes sense. So the key to us is partnerships. And the same for our trying to deliver on that. And I touched upon in your first question, how do we deliver on the fact that we have got 1 billion fans around the world and try and do something meaningful? So the first thing is engaging those fans. So we try and engage them in social action within their communities. And the other one is we work with a charity called Right to Play, who work in some of the most disadvantaged countries around the world, and we work with them to deliver because our ethos and our work are aligned. So rather than us trying to put staff into Senegal, we'll work with Right to Play to deliver the programs in Senegal, and we work with them on that.
And is it possible to better understand where the money for the foundation comes from? You use club money, sponsors, matches?
All of the above. So it's a combination of, I don't know how it translates, but in the UK charity world, we talk about it in terms of restricted and unrestricted money. So restricted is through grants or commissions or etc. or public money. So we get funded by the Home Office, as an example, or a section of that is Home Office funded, it doesn't come from the Home Office direct, to deliver work for young people at risk of being pulled into gangs and risk-taking behaviour. That's an example of restricted money. Whereas if we hold a fundraising event, an example is we played Barcelona, our Legends, LFC Legends team, played the Barcelona Legends team at Anfield Stadium in March, and all of the proceeds from that, so the club give us the stadium, the club staff work for free, and all of the proceeds from that we then use to fund our programs and fund others. So that's an example of fundraising, so unrestricted. However, again, I'm quite passionate that although it's unrestricted, that's a responsibility because that's fans giving their money, they're donating. So we designate that money. So in effect, we make it restricted. So we say the proceeds from this game will fund this program. So we're specific. We designate it. I think that's important because I think there's a danger sometimes it can feel a bit nebulous. Where can they give into? And also, certain charities have a very emotive cause. Perhaps ours is broader. And yes, we have the Liverpool passion, but it's wider than that. We don't just work with Liverpool supporters. We work with any young person and families who needs our support. So making sure that we tell the story about the impact, which links back to our first conversation. And that's why how we articulate our link to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to talk about our impact and hopefully demonstrate that we're spending that money wisely and we're spending it to have the most impact.
Anna, going back to you. So sustainability is today a very important element for any sports brand, for any brand actually. So what do sponsors look for when they sign in with Formula E?
So yeah, great question, and I alluded to in my first answer that kind of commercial imperative across a broad range of different organisations was definitely the bedrock of what has got Formula E to this stage in its life. And I'll probably use a couple of examples that, a little bit like what Matt was talking about from Liverpool's perspective. How do brands, or why do brands associate with the championship, and what are they looking to get out of it? And if we don't do our job as to grow a sports platform to, perhaps those words I used earlier, to inspire and excite a generation around the move to electric and what it means to them both globally but also in their local communities, then we fundamentally fail, because those organisations could go out and either partner with other bodies, or they could go and just spend they could keep investing in the marketing of their products and their goods and their services. So how we do that and doing that in a really unique way is critical to us. I'll use a couple of examples just to bring that to life. So we have a title partner called ABB. ABB is actually a really old organisation. It's got north of 100,000 employees around the world. Having heard of ABB, some of you might know of ABB. Maybe show of hands, anyone heard of ABB before now? So maybe about 40% of you or something like that. I didn't know much about them at all. Once you've now heard of them, when you go home and open your electrical box at home, you might see a little ABB sticker. And where you, I think, will start to see a lot more of them is, I mean, this is a business that started off in trains and you know, lots of this mechanical and electrical equipment that you see in your in electrical supply chain. What they're moving to is how they can take those capabilities and, you know, create huge business benefit around the move to electric transport. So you might have seen this year, they just announced a big deal with Shell. They won't be Shell's exclusive provider, but they're going to be a major provider of fast charging infrastructure into Shell forecourts around the world. So this year, you know, Shell, you'd think that's a business which, you know, on the face of it would be difficult to partner with a championship. Their focus on moving from a fuel company to being an energy company, to the growth of the Shell Recharge brand. And ABB have this, you know, understandable feeling of ownership around the Formula E Championship. They're a title partner, they're a heavy investor in terms of what we do. They see charging and their message around charging as something that they own in terms of their relationship with the championship. They realise the benefit of cross-marketing together. So Shell came in this year, they were a title sponsor around our Berlin race, and then we were heading out to Jakarta in Indonesia shortly after our first race in Jakarta. And I don't think ABB really, you know, we ask our partners, what are your key markets and where do you want to activate? I don't think Jakarta was on their list. We said, look, we think there's going to be something interesting here. We've got huge government support from a national, but also from a local level. I think you should come out and activate. So Shell and ABB went out and ran a series of meetings in Jakarta, and were just blown away by the engagement that they had. And, you know, when we think about our challenge around the move to electric here in the Western world, you know, we're thinking about, you know, the cars that we choose to buy and can we afford it. You go to a city like Jakarta and they're not worrying about cars, but what they are worrying about is electrification of the public transport system. Everyone, or huge numbers of people get around on motorbikes. So how a motorbike is going to move to electric, and how they're going to address that from an infrastructure point of view. So from an ABB and a Shell perspective, suddenly they saw the opportunity through the championship to use that platform as a really powerful one. So that's an example kind of on the B2B side. But then when it comes down to the social level, you know, programs like the FIA Girls on Track program, we take that, I think, just under $500,000 a year is through support from our partners. So, you know, back to Matt's example, you know, ABB, DHL, we've got Hankook coming on board as our new tyre partner from next season. They are, a portion of their sponsorship money is specifically designated to that program. And those are programs where we go into the local community, we find talent that are, you know, either leaders in education, you know, great female drivers, you know, local talent, so they speak to local children, their local language, they understand the system that they're in. There's no good me going to Jakarta talking about how I stuck with maths. Like, my experience in the education system is not relevant to those girls. We need to make sure we have local talent. And so how we bring that to life locally has been really important to us. And again, you know, I think we had about 500 girls came and spent full day with us during the season this year, and we're looking to how we expand that program next year. So it's a range of activities from that kind of global messaging and how they get to partner with the championship. And I'm kind of leaving to one side, they're obviously just brand association around the media value, but how they actually take that to the next level and do something unique with the championship.
So it's getting easier to find sponsors for me.
You know what, with the last 2 or 3 years have been super challenging. Being a global events business that has been, you know, very curtailed, especially through 2020 and the early parts of 2021, has been a big challenge for us. You know, in major sports like football, the understanding around their media value and distribution of content, you know, meant that although they were hugely impacted at the gate, they were able to get that content out. For a young championship, it's incredibly difficult when getting out on the road and educating people in what you're doing is hugely important to your growth. But the last 6-7 months have been really, really positive. And we've got a new car coming next season, which everyone's excited about. And for those of you that have any awareness of the championship, McLaren and Maserati join us next season. So that's going to be, I think, the first time Maserati, McLaren, Porsche have lined up against each other, I think, ever, and Maserati and McLaren since, I think, 1969. So for a young championship to start to get involved in the romance of the history and what the future to supercar brands looks like from an electric point of view is exciting for us.
That's also very interesting. Everyone is converting, really. So, Murray, of best practices that can be applied to sustainable event management, and how does it work when those events move from location regularly, for instance?
Yeah, great. Okay, so I think we've got probably got two questions in one there, which we can usefully separate initially, but I'll bring it together. I think best practice examples for us that I could share more recently would be 2021, the G7 held in the UK, and COP26. So two very high-profile events. They pushed event sustainability awareness up, which was helpful across the board. We provided the certification against the standard I mentioned, 2012 one, for both of those events. And of course, they're mobile. They don't repeat in the same place year on year. So they were best practice because they obviously embraced that standard and they went for external certification. They got that independent recognition. They gave it that credibility that builds transparency, builds reputation, and so on. And to do that, they've got to, obviously identify the risks, and they can do that through engaging with the stakeholders and including the community, and realizing opportunities as well, but then setting goals, objectives, and achieving them. So ultimately, a best practice company will be one that does that really effectively. And therefore, it becomes a company that uses less of everything. It uses less energy, generates less waste, uses less water, but also employs local people, buys locally wherever possible, addresses transportation to and from events, for example, addresses the integrity and the governance of the organization itself, and leaves a legacy, very importantly, leaves a legacy behind if it's moving on to another venue. So that's what best practice should look like, and the certification process will obviously, as I mentioned before, come along and assess and challenge that and make sure it is actually delivering, it is getting results. And the SIRVs that Emmanuel mentioned earlier, so that's the SIGA Independent Rating and Verification Scheme, acts in a very similar way to that. It's a set of criteria organizations will be tested against to ensure they make the grade. And obviously that is graded within the SIRV scheme itself. But bringing independence to that is very important. So it's not just a box-ticking exercise. That's critical in all of this. And then I'll just come on to the other part of your, actually thinking about one of those examples I mentioned. I know G7 put a lot on transportation and localized transportation to make an impact that way. We had another client, well, we still have them actually, Goodwood Racing Circuit. People in England would know what that is. It's a very popular racing circuit for motor events. And in their first year of certification, so think 2012 one or think SIRVs for that matter, they increased the use of public transportation to and from their events by 40%. So, that was just the beginning, and that was just one metric. So it can do a lot, it can achieve a lot, and it can make them for a much more efficient and profitable organization too, that stands through the recognition to obviously get a stronger brand, build a stronger brand. But the second part of your question, Andre, was to do with what about the organizations that move from place to place? So those that do, so I guess think Formula E, if there is a constant central governance structure in place, that is the auditable entity, if you like, then that's what gets audited. But at each new cycle, with the new event and the new venue in context. So it is possible to move it around. G7 and COP26 were one-off. They disbanded their management structure, and therefore they discontinued their certification after the events. But other organizations we work with will move that event around. I guess think next of Liverpool FC, fixed venue, and therefore that it's repeat and the venue doesn't change. The event does, of course. The certification process must assess the event as well. And so that's fairly straightforward, but where the event moves, it's less so. But there are things we can do. We can adapt to that quite well. And obviously offer the certification, but in these instance of a one-off event like the G7, we were able to go and give them early recognition of the progress they're making. So we couldn't get to the event itself to assess that in time for them to use the information in terms of publicity, but we were able to give them a statement of progress and give them that early recognition that their intent was right and they were progressing at the right rate to reach certification. And that was before the event, and it was before the certification concluded. So that just gives you an example of the adaptability that we can bring to the process, regardless of the nature of the sporting event itself.
It's actually so important. So I actually just sat on our ISO 2012-1 wrap-up audit session at our last race, and the impact that going through the accreditation processes is so important. It's not just the standards that we hold ourselves to, but any one of these events are probably working with north of 100 different suppliers. So the impact we have and the expectations we have on them is passed on, and then they then go and pass those learnings on to their other customers. And we see that commercially as well. Talked about being a travelling roadshow. DHL are a huge part of our logistics. Aviation is a huge impact area, and how
the supply chain must...
Right, exactly. And so setting those examples and holding people to account. And we got to the end of the season this year, and we're like, it is fundamentally not good enough that across too many of our events this year, we've seen suppliers spill fuel. It's like a really simple, small example. But why is it we're seeing it as such a repeated problem? Is it because our SLAs aren't good enough? Is it our enforcement of our SLAs aren't good enough? Is it that we're not educating our staff to manage those suppliers properly on site? So that's one of it feels like a small one, but if you multiply that across the hundreds and thousands of different touch points those suppliers might have, if we can address those issues and get people thinking about how they operate and operate to the right level, that can have a huge impact more broadly. So setting standards, having them independently regulated is a really vital part of improvement.
I think we have some minutes left for some questions from our audience. If you want to make a question, we have microphones on the side. We have a question here. Thank you.
Okay. Hello. I'm Vasco Borges. I'm from a sports newspaper in Portugal called Record. So, out of curiosity, I would like to ask Anna in first place if there's any plans of Formula E to bring the championship here to Portugal or to work with some Portuguese organization. And to the remaining panel, if you're currently working with here in Portugal or with some Portuguese community or organization in other countries. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll go quickly. In short, I think we've looked a number of times at coming to Portugal. It's definitely a market that interests us. Portugal, we'd also love to come to Spain. We have Spanish founders, and for a variety of reasons, we've not been able to come to either country. I think we looked at Portugal during lockdown as well. You guys came up with a really great solution potentially for us to complete our championship, but we ended up going to Berlin for one reason or another. So in short, we'd love to come here. We're an expanding championship, so who knows what the future might hold.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have anything to add. I'm not aware of what we're doing in Portugal in response to event management at this stage. I suspect not much at the moment, but that is changing because 2012-1 is on the agenda, serves is on the agenda. We're seeing post-COVID era a lot of new interest being generated, so watch this space.
Matt, I don't know if you have something to add.
Yeah, only from the perspective of the point of Portuguese communities in the UK. So the short answer is yes, we do obviously work with those communities. I think in terms of working in Portugal, we haven't done, obviously we're always open to it, but I think our focus is often on areas of highest need, so it'll be about looking at what that need is. And we obviously are fortunate to have Portuguese players and players that have come from clubs in Portugal, so we have a connection there too.
Daniela, want to add something?
Yes, I'm from a different angle. From the angle of environment and the impact of some sports on climate. So when it comes to Formula, how did you call it?
Formula E.
Formula E. E means for energy or electricity. How do we produce that energy? We use water. So that impacts SDG 6 about water and sanitation, and also SDG 14 oceans when there is water. So there are always two sides of the coin, and therefore we have to make sure that in order to avoid some pollution, we do not increase pollution or use a very important resource like water, and there is more and more scarcity of water, than to produce energy for a sport. So it's quite interesting and fascinating if you think of that. And then we produce also energy by burning garbage. Garbage is a big mafia thing. So there, for instance, in order to produce energy for some of our sports, we have to pay attention about the integrity and anti-corruption that SIGA is talking about. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if you have someone else wants to make a question. Well, we have 2 minutes left. I don't know. I would like to know if you will be willing to comment on something that last week Paris Saint-Germain coach Christophe Galtier and striker Kylian Mbappé were asked why they usually travel by private plane instead of using, for instance, a train. Well, they left, joked at the question, and there was an immediate backlash with the controversy among the top trending topics on Twitter. My question is, I don't know if you want to comment on this specific episode, but the idea of my question is there still a long way to go on creating awareness and sustainability in sports? We're still far from achieving that.
Yeah, I think my view, the simple answer would be yes. I can't comment on. I wasn't aware of that situation, but I know Liverpool Football Club has recognised that and is trying to progress in that space. I don't think we claim to be experts. I was talking to one of your colleagues last night about the club going through the process of getting the accreditation, etc. And I think certainly the UK clubs are recognising it and seeing what can be done. Obvious examples, travelling up and down the country by train as opposed to plane, etc. So, but I think it is important to recognise the wider piece. So as I said about sustainability in terms of the wider society, I think clubs, I would say this, I'm biased, but the clubs have been doing that for a long time, and that's where we're strongest. It's probably the other areas where we need to focus and develop.
And players have a big responsibility here in helping create awareness.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions I saw in the initial ideas of questions is around players and leaders and managers in the space of sport and how they lead. So one of the Liverpool players, we provide an electric car scheme for our staff. One of the Liverpool players, Thiago, took one of those cars and visibly took one of those cars for the right reason. So that's important because people, not just internally, but nationally and internationally look up to those.
As an example.
Exactly.
So I don't know if Mary.
Yeah, I'd like to comment just quickly on that. I think definitely the awareness raising has got a long way to go. Not just in sport, but across industry. And it was mentioned, I think, Daniela, in your opening, it's not just about environment, which is, it's a historical perception of sustainability. It is so much more. But now people are getting that. They know there's also social, and it's economic, and it's ethical. But it's also governance. And SIGA, that's what SIGA is very strong on. And that's what needs to, I think, be pushed harder through all industries, not just the sporting industry. And I think the example you use about some of the hypocrisy out there, the use of private jets, etc., that doesn't help, but transparency can help that, and it's a very important pillar in any sustainability strategy. So certainly a long way to go. It's 2022. In 2021, if we take climate change, for example, global emissions of CO2 increased by 6%, and that's under Code Red for humanity. So telling me there's a long way to go.
Anna, do you want to add something to this?
It's actually off the
question?
topic of sport, but I enjoyed reading last night that the UK government have asked all global leaders coming in for the Queen's funeral to not come in on private jets, and they're going to be busing them in from West London for her funeral. I think probably a lot of that is around security and just how on earth Heathrow is going to cope over the next few days. But I thought it was interesting that, from a sustainability perspective, we're making a message about how they expect people
Don't
to
use the
travel.
private plane.
Yeah, exactly. I think going back to your point on fans, I think, I'm sure Matt would say the same. I think everyone that works in sport and content, we've all only just got started. We have a huge responsibility to use sports messaging, the power that we have, the ability to produce content and distribute that week in, week out, to educate and to take people on a journey. So I'd like to think there's been real positive movement, and I often get asked a question about what do we think about F1. I think it's great that F1 are talking about this. I think it's great that football clubs are talking about this, that broadcasts are talking about it. Formula E was obviously, was founded with that at its core. But no one can, I think what comes across loud and clear from today's session is no one can do it on their own. We all need everyone to put their shoulders to the wheel to drive real and meaningful change.
Okay. We have to close. Thanks very much.
Thank you.